Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
So we'll open public session. Okay. Members, I'd like to welcome you all to our 13th meeting, and any of the members of the public who are looking in, and we're recorded. Okay, members, the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. And I've also been asked to continue to remind you about the enhanced new audio and video equipment in committee rooms, so side conversations are very likely to be picked up by the microphones. I want to advise those in the public gallery that you're very welcome to use mobile devices so long as they're in airplane mode and all devices are muted, and you can connect to assembly Wi-Fi, and password details are available on the gallery rules, and it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. Members, are any new interests to declare that you haven't declared the first meeting? No. Okay, member. First item then is then item 1, apologies. We have an apology in from William Irvin, Shell Megalveen, and the chair, Tom Elliott, will be here around 10:45, so I'm deputising for him until he arrives. That's all apologies, Pat. Okay. Number 2, I refer you to the draft minutes of the 16th of May in the pack at pages 5 to 16. Have you any comments, or are you content with the minutes as drafted? Content. Our members agreed, okay, that we can publish these on the website? Yeah. Remember, the clerk has been asked if members are content that we share the committee's response on the budget agreed last week and send to Finance Committee with raise for the research on the budget. You content?
Yep.
The matters rising. Okay, members, I refer you to correspondence dated the 21st of May at pages 35 to 36 of the table papers. Response from the Department to our letter dated the 3rd of May requesting a written briefing on the Animal Welfare Livestock Exports Bill and whether there are plans to extend this bill to here. The bill itself removes Britain as a land bridge for export livestock, meaning no livestock can be taken from the north or the south of Ireland through Britain and onwards to mainland Europe for slaughter. The bill has moved through the House of Commons into the House of Lords, with the most recent reading, third reading, held on the 14th of May. The bill is expected to receive royal assent at the end of May and come into force immediately. The bill is not a piece of legislation developed by the Department, nor has it been extended to include here. However, the Department will continue to review the progress of this bill by engaging with colleagues in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA and other devolved administration. Members, you can tend to note? Tend to note. Okay, members. Also, a letter has been issued to the committee this morning by email, and the Minister has written to the Speaker. And in the letter, the DEFRA Secretary of State has now confirmed from the 17th of May, the areas relating to disease awareness, disease preparedness and disease control over animal and plant health responsibility has now returned to the Minister Muir in the context of the criteria in the letter. So that letter came through this morning. Okay. Members, number 5, agenda item 5. It's now listed as agenda item 14, your table papers.
Chair, sorry,
John.
before we move on from that, because I know that members had raised various issues at different times, will we have that correspondence copied to us? I mean, I know that in response to the queries raised, and also because of the outstanding issues and the seriousness of those, the Minister certainly appeared to be working hard to get clarification around some matters in relation to those powers. Will we be copied that correspondence so that the situation's clarified to all of us?
Yeah.
Above and beyond, sorry Chair, above and beyond the letter that's come out this morning to us?
Yeah, to committee members. Will we be able to see this?
The letter was emailed.
It's literally just came in there.
All right, we've all got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just come in just before the meeting started.
Literally, yeah. Look on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, member. So agenda item 5, which is now listed as agenda item 14 in the table papers, is a briefing from the Department on the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment. The reason for the change in the agenda number is the committee team removed the item from the agenda as they believed the papers were unlikely to be received, so then it had to be added back again. So members, I refer you to table papers page 143 to 151 for the briefing paper. I'd like to welcome Dr. Rosemary Agnew, Director of Agriculture Policy Department from the Department, and also Mr. George Moffat, Deputy Director of Agriculture Policy from DERA as well. And members, by way of introduction, the briefing paper highlights that the policy intent of the Farm Sustainability Payment is to provide a balance between providing a safety net to help a farm business withstand shocks that are beyond its ability to manage effectively, and to encourage farm businesses to be sustainable, efficient, competitive and to manage risk proactively. The Farm Sustainability Payment will replace the current basic payment scheme and will be phased in over a 2-year period, commencing with the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025 and the full Farm Sustainability Payment in 2026. And members, we will take in a briefing now and then consider the relevant SL1 later in the meeting. So, post at this point, we're going to invite Rosemary and George to brief the committee, and you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide the committee with this briefing on the Department's plans to introduce the Farm Sustainability Payment as you've outlined, and this will replace the current basic payment scheme. Really, by way of background, a consultation exercise on these proposals was undertaken in late 2021, and the responses informed 54 policy decisions that were announced in March 2022. Input from the Agricultural Policy Stakeholder Group has been essential to the development of the programme since mid-June 2021, and Department officials have worked in a co-design process with this group to chart a way forward. Recently, the committee received a high-level written briefing on the full farm support and development programme, and this is the first discussion at committee of Minister Muir's proposals for the farm sustainability payment. George and I are here today really to provide you with the details of our current planning, and we very much welcome the views of the committee on the proposals that we're going to present today. Mr. Chair, you indicated the policy intent, so I won't repeat that. But really just to clarify that our current planning assumption is that from 2025, farm businesses will need to activate 5 entitlements on 5 hectares of eligible land to meet the requirements of the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment, and from 2026 to meet the requirements of the Farm Sustainability Payment going forward. With the introduction of the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025, current basic payment scheme entitlements will be carried forward. That is, there will be no rebasing of entitlements, and they will be used then to claim the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025. The entitlements will expire, and new FSP entitlements, or Farm Sustainability Payment entitlements, will be allocated in the same number and unit value, subject to any redirection of funding to other measures, only to those farm businesses who meet the eligibility conditions of the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment. The full Farm Sustainability Payment is planned to go live in 2026, and that is planned to include changes to land eligibility. It will have new farm sustainability standards, a new penalty regime associated to those farm sustainability standards, and a number of conditionalities are planned. It's planned that the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025 will introduce some changes to the eligibility requirements to ensure that only active farm businesses are eligible to claim these new payments. The current planning assumption is that farm businesses that solely produced grass or grass silage and/or maintained land suitable for grazing or cultivation but undertook no further agricultural activity during a 2-year historic reference period, published as 2020 and 2021, will not be eligible to claim. Similarly, those businesses that leased out all of their BPS entitlements during the historic years of 2020 and 2021 will not be eligible to claim. Given that the purpose of the payment is to enable otherwise viable businesses to withstand market and other shocks, we believe that the inclusion of businesses that do not undertake agricultural activity or agricultural production or produce only grass silage is justifiable. An exercise is currently underway to identify those farm businesses who are directly affected by this element of the policy, and an initial check against departmental records suggests that we've identified approximately 2,100 farm businesses that will be impacted by that particular policy element. Moving on then, to be eligible for Farm Sustainability Transition Payment, applicants must activate at least 5 entitlements on 5 hectares of eligible land as part of their 2025 application. This represents an increase in the minimum claim size compared with the current basic payment scheme, where applicants were required to activate 3 entitlements and have 3 hectares of eligible land. Very small farm businesses generally have other sources of income, and we believe therefore have less need for a safety net payment. Approximately 1,400 farm businesses will be impacted by this, although it is important to stress that these businesses have options available to them to acquire additional land and payment entitlements to ensure that they remain eligible moving forward. Or they will have the option to sell their entitlements before the end of the entitlement trading period in 2025. Moving on quickly to the full Farm Sustainability Payment for 2026, we plan to introduce that from the 1st of January 2026, and it will build on the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment. And there are a number of other proposals in relation to that Farm Sustainability Payment in terms of the conditions or the eligibility. In line with the previous decision, we're planning to progressively cap farm sustainability payments above £60,000 beginning in 2026 and phasing that in over a 2-year period. Analysis undertaken of the payment data suggests that around 260 farm businesses will be impacted by the introduction of progressive capping. But it's important to understand that when that is fully implemented, it will only release £2.2 million annually to fund other areas of the agricultural support programme. As previously announced, it's also planned to revise the land eligibility rules from 2026, and under the revised rules, land eligible for payment will be land parcels currently mapped in the land parcel identification system, but also including soft features such as rush, scrub and bracken. Applicants to the farm sustainability payment in 2026 will also be required to comply with new farm sustainability standards, which will replace the current cross-compliance standards, and the exact makeup of these new standards and the underpinning set of requirements are currently under development. A new penalty regime is also being developed. As previously announced, applicants to the farm sustainability payment will also be required to meet a number of conditionalities in order to receive their full farm sustainability payment in 2026. These include participation in the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, with compliance defined as registering for the scheme and undertaking training when it's offered. Participation in carbon footprinting, with compliance defined as registering for carbon footprinting and undergoing the training when it's offered. And participation in the Ruminant Genetics Programme, with compliance defined as registering for the programme, undergoing training when it's offered, and the provision of specified genetic profiles, which is a DNA tagging of a defined percentage of bovine animals within the herd, breeding animals within the herd. In due course, the requirement to develop a nutrient management plan will also form part of the conditionalities, but this may not be possible in 2026. As you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, statutory rules will be required to provide the Departmental legal powers to introduce the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025 and the Farm Sustainability Payment in 2026. These SRs will be made under the powers conferred on DERA by paragraph 2.1 of Schedule 6 of the UK Agriculture Act 2020. They must therefore be laid before the Assembly under affirmative resolution procedure. You've received the draft SL1 for the statutory rule intended to provide the legal powers to introduce the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment in 2025. Drafting of this SR is continuing, but it will in due course come before this committee for scrutiny. At this stage, our planning assumption is that this rule would come into operation on the 1st of January 2025. Mr. Chairman, members, I hope you find this brief overview helpful. Very interested to hear the views of the committee today on the proposals that we're presenting, and George and I are here and happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, for that very comprehensive briefing. Certainly, there's a lot of changes coming down the track, and it's important that these are very coherently communicated to farmers, so there isn't a big shock come 25, 26. I suppose before I move around the room, there's a couple of points that I want to maybe ask of you, Rosemary. Just to be absolutely clear, the current entitlements that farmers hold under the current BPS will, and they've obviously filled in their single application form. Their deadline was last week. Will those entitlements will carry over as per they are now, and the value will be the same when they get their single farm payment in the autumn time this year? Is that right?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Farmers have claimed their basic payment scheme by the 15th of May. The system hasn't changed this year.
Yeah.
The value of those payments that were activated for payment will be what's paid on in September, hopefully in September this year.
Yeah. And then moving ahead, Rosemary, you mentioned subject to redirection, and I'm guessing this refers to the 17% that will eventually be modulated to pay for the likes of the beef scheme. What about the likes of sheep farmers who will also receive that cut, but there doesn't seem to be a scheme included in the new farm programme? Is there any consideration being given to letting sheep farmers, for example, claim back some of the money that will be taken off them for to fund the beef scheme.
You're right, Mr. Chair. We hope to be in a position to bring forward a suckler cow scheme from the 1st of January 2025, and we'll bring that forward for consideration at this committee, but that will potentially reduce entitlement unit values by another 8% to take it up to the 17 that we've discussed. If we move forward, and Minister is very keen that we really look at support for the sheep sector, but if we look at a headage payment for sheep, it still has to come out of that 17% of the overall budget. So it's a lot of money going across a lot more numbers. But we're currently working at the stage to try to identify the strategic needs of the sheep sector and then bring forward proposals to Minister to consider as to what levers he could deploy to meet those strategic needs. And that work is currently ongoing. So we haven't forgotten about the sheep sector, and I think when the decisions were announced previously, was indicated that we needed to look at the sheep sector. I think there are a number of other sectors as well that probably feel, if we look at the dairy sector, the arable sector, it's across the board. The way that the programme is designed is that over time and in line with the uptake of new schemes, the budget for the farm sustainability payment will reduce to a lower level as funding is released to other schemes. So 17% of it can be removed to blue box or headage type schemes, but our intention would be, our planning assumptions would be that we would reduce it, for example, to help fund the Farming with Nature, the replacement agri-environment schemes and some other schemes as well. And then those would be available to all farmers. So there will be routes for all farmers to apply for different packages of support as they move forward. They're just not all coming on stream at the same time.
Rosemary, a note just from one of the farm papers there that the Scottish devolved region, they have introduced a scheme for sheep as well. Perhaps that's something we could take a look at. And before I move around the room, just on the briefing note, I'm trying to preempt some of the questions I'll be asked, Rosemary, when I go back out again. In the briefing note, it said that in terms of the historic reference period, that's 2021. Is that the entire 2 year? Is that the historic reference period, and the entire 2 years are part of it? So, say for example, if a farmer farmed for a part of 20 and 21, and not all of 20 and 21, would they still be eligible to apply for the new farm sustainability scheme?
The historic reference period, really, for farm businesses to remain eligible, they will have had, and I'll just pick one, they'll have had cattle registered in their herd in 2020 or in 2021. It's not across both years. And we recognise that in a farm business, sometimes things can happen. There can be health reasons, there can be external shocks that maybe a farm business didn't be as active in 1 year as it maybe is in the next. So it's within one of those years.
Yeah.
And I just picked cattle there, but obviously to remain eligible, businesses will need to have had cattle, sheep or rearing goats registered in APHIS, or rearing deer for meat, pigs or poultry combined with grass selling, or at least 3 hectares of a determined area of an arable or horticultural crop. So those were specified earlier, and our current planning assumption is that we're moving forward with those, and there would be somewhere around, I think it's around 1,600 farm businesses that would be impacted by those particular criteria. But the department's intention is that we will write to all those businesses that will be impacted, setting out the options that are available to them. And the main option available to them will be to sell their entitlements before the trading period closes in 2025.
It could be important to get the communication plan really right, and as well, because also I was going to mention the communication plan, because it's important that farmers know, for example, that one of the conditions for being the new scheme is being part of the soil sampling scheme and taking part in the training, as well as the carbon footprint and the genetics programme. So I think it's important that there's a very clear, coherent communication strategy as well, the department, to farms impacted, Rosemary.
Mr. Chair, I totally agree, and we have developed a communication strategy and are working very hard to develop quite a detailed communications plan around how we would take that forward. That includes, and many of the committee members will be familiar with the old FAST newsletter where we communicated directly with every farm business. So we're going to resurrect that under a new name and say, here's what you're going to need to do. And we'll ensure that all communication, lots of press articles, will try and make it as absolutely as clear as possible. We are working through, you'll have heard me say as well, Mr. Chairman, that taking these up when you're offered, we're looking at, we can't make that as blunt as, well, if you don't take it up the first time you're offered, you don't get a payment. That seems very harsh to us at the minute. So we're looking at a number of options to discuss with Minister around what that actually means in practice.
Thank you, Rosemary. I'm going to move around the room. John.
Thank you, Chair. Rosemary George, thank you also. It's good to see you. Noting the inclusion in the conditionalities of the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, Carbon Footprinting Project, Ruminant Genetics Programme, and for the future, the Nutrient Management Plan, can I ask, is there a measure of how these conditionalities will help improve better environmental outcomes? I'm assuming there's some kind of projection that's been taken into consideration while this was being designed.
Yes. The programme itself has a number of outcomes that we're seeking to achieve from across the full programme, not just this one payment particular scheme. That's around better environmental sustainability, increased productivity, improved long-term resilience, and more effective functioning supply chains. And we have set a number of metrics for the programme that we're seeking to achieve, and we've defined those as SMART targets, so that by the end of a 5-year period, this is the improvements that we hope to see in environmental sustainability and productivity and resilience, etc. And I'm sure we'd be very happy at some stage to present that to yourselves. That work is ongoing, but we have defined those targets. Initially, what we're trying to do with farm businesses is to get them started on a journey, to get them the baseline information, so that any farm business will know its baseline soil information. And then whenever it comes round again to do your soil testing again in 4 or 5 years' time, we want to see an improvement. And we'll gradually build that to demonstrate an environmental improvement. The same with carbon. It's about creating a baseline, and alongside that baseline, and we'll talk about that in the next agenda item, there'll be a number of mitigations and advice that will be given to a farm business to reduce their carbon emissions. And as we move forward, we would want to see those reducing. And the same with genetics, because genetics can not only offer increased productivity, but there are significant environmental gains, particularly around methane emissions through different breeding regimes for livestock. So again, we'll want to see that as we move forward. But a lot of this is about creating a baseline in the first instance to be able to demonstrate that businesses are on a journey, and that journey will drive them towards environmental improvement. But productivity and environmental gains go hand in hand. The more productive a farm business is, the more environmental improvement it's likely to deliver.
Yep. So if I may come back on that, Chair. So these conditionalities around better environmental practice and the outcomes from that, they're based, I take it, on existing departmental commitments on climate, and also hopefully future more stringent targets and aims around pollution, and we've seen some pretty bad examples of that just this week, and it seems sometimes almost every week. So I take it all of that will be taken into consideration as well.
Obviously, and I didn't mention it today, but I know we will when we come to carbon footprinting. Climate change is really, really important to the Department, one of Minister's top priorities, as is the environmental improvement. So all of these measures are driven, or hopefully will drive environmental improvement at farm level. But we need to start with baseline information so that those improvements can be made and we see a journey.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Patsy?
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for your briefing today. I wonder if you could give me some indication, please, as to, I'm looking at the FSP conditionalities, and there's participation in a soil nutrient health scheme and completing the CAFRE training, the carbon footprint scheme and completing the CAFRE training, and then there's the ruminant genetics programme and training associated with that. Could you give us any indication how long these courses would run? Because I'm sure there'll be farmers looking at this and saying, will ever get any time for farming?
Well, I'll start with, because it's the one we're familiar with and it's the one that's already up and running, is the training for the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. Farmers who have participated in the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme in Zone 1, many have already completed their training. Training is either online training that can be done as and when suits the farmer. So they register for an online course. I'm not sure of the total duration of it, but they can stop and start it. Or it is 2 evenings delivered by an external delivery agent, where the first evening of a couple of hours is explaining what the soil nutrient health reports are, and the second evening is around how do I use that soil analysis to better use the nutrients on my farm and develop into a nutrient management plan. So it's not a year's course, it's not a 6-week course. The first one is a simple understanding of what soil analysis is, of what carbon benchmarking is, or carbon footprinting, of what genetics is and how it can value. So we're starting with a simple baseline because we recognise sort of the educational attainment, we recognise how busy farm businesses are, and we want to try to keep them moving with us. Sorry, George has just passed me a note. I think it takes about 2 hours to complete the online training.
For all of them?
Yes.
Yeah, for all of them. So for the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, there's 2 modules as such, and it's around 2 hours for each one. As Rosemary says, you can dip in and out of that. It's online.
Two modules for each headline, or each.
There's 2 elements to the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. There'll be 2 elements for the carbon as well, and really one is introductory to set the scene to help farmers understand the data they're getting, the reports they're getting, and then the second bit is around using that data, for example, to develop a nutrient management plan,
yes,
or to implement mitigations for carbon, which we'll talk about later.
Okay, right, thank you. All right, thanks, Chair.
And would you be using the BDS network for that, or what?
Sorry, the
Yes,
BDG.
BDG
Yes.
networks?
Yes. There will be all sorts of mechanisms for this, but in advance of the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme for all of the Zone 1 farm businesses that completed the testing, they, with their soil analysis reports, they received an invitation to training indicating to them that it would become a conditionality of future payments and inviting them to participate. So there had been direct contact with every farm business. And I think, I've certainly seen it, Chair, at a meeting where a farmer sitting in the audience did say, well, I did receive my soil reports, but I didn't read the covering letter. So I think there is a role to make sure that it is clearly communicated. Maybe looked at the soil reports but didn't read the covering letter, which indicated that, almost needed to do the training. And the training would be a condition of future farm sustainability payment.
Thank you, Rosemary. We'll move on now. Nicola?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rosemary and George. I just have a quick question about the budget and budgetary constraints. And I know there was conversation back in January that a potential new Labour government in Britain would actually reduce the budget for the North here for the basic payment scheme. And I suppose after yesterday's news, it looks like we could be closer to that there now in the next few weeks. Can you give me an assessment just of how likely you think this is, and what your concerns would be in that case, and then what impact that would have on our farmers here, and I suppose on your policy objectives as well within this document, please?
Just give you a figure. For 2024-25, there was 329.4 million allocated, earmarked agriculture, agri-environment and wider rural economy funding to Northern Ireland from Treasury. That earmarked funding cannot be used for, not used for those purposes, would need to be returned to Treasury, but it cannot be used elsewhere in DERA or in the Northern Ireland block. So it has been earmarked funding. You're absolutely right that future provision of funding for agriculture, environment and rural support will be a matter for the next UK government, whoever that may be. And as a department, with the Department of Finance, we're working collectively to engage with Treasury on this earmarked funding and the future allocation beyond 2025. I'm sure you've heard some of the statements around some of it being greener and smaller, but we just don't know. But it's really, really imperative that any settlement does reflect DAERA's policy objectives and ambitions, that we're progressing through the overall programme. And as an absolute minimum, I know that Minister has had discussions with his ministerial colleagues in the Department of Finance that we maintain the current budget allocation uplifted for inflation. So I can't give you any more than that, but it really, we have no budget for this programme after the end of March 2025 until a new Parliament is in place.
That's fair enough, and I suppose that engagement is key really with the Department of Finance and with Treasury as well, with the Minister. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, Chair.
Thomas?
Thank you, and thank you, Rosemary, for your briefing today. The increase to 5 hectares is obviously knocking out quite a number of smaller farmers to them. And again, what incentive is there for them? Some of them will maybe take on a little land to so they're eligible for to come in under this scheme. Others will not, and some will just hold on to their land. They'll not even lease it out to anyone else. So given the issue of the environment, the carbon footprint, all of that there, what incentive would there be for that smaller farmer who's going to hold on to his land but doesn't qualify for this scheme, in order that he may be able to move forward, even with regards to the whole environment and carbon footprint and all of that type of thing?
Obviously, as I said during my introduction, we think there are about 1,400 businesses that would be impacted by that change. I think it's fair to say that when we undertook the consultation towards the end of 2021, we did consult on increasing it to 10 hectares, but a decision was made at that time to reduce it to 5. Obviously, decision now needs to be made by Minister Muir as to what that will be, and he's very open to hearing your views today around that minimum claim size. But to answer your question directly, if a farm is 3 hectares, it will still be able to apply to the Farming with Nature package to help deliver biodiversity, water quality outcomes. There's still a route to receive farm support. There may be a route through training to achieve the knowledge to do other things. There may be capital support, etc. But the option is there for that farm to acquire 2 more hectares and 2 more entitlements. So there are options. But as I said, this is still our planning assumption. Minister Muir has not yet made that decision.
Okay. Thank you. That's okay. Anya?
Thank you, Declan. Thank you, Rosemary. I suppose of 2 supplementaries, one off the back of Nicola and one off the back of Tom, in relation to the transition between basic payment scheme to the new sustainability payment scheme. Due to the lack of clarity that we have post 2025, would the department, or has the department considered possibly delaying the transition until further clarity is sought on that?
In honesty, not yet. I would hope that clarity can be sorted if we have a general election, as per was announced. It's still quite early on in the year, and we would hope by the autumn budget there would be an announcement. I can't say any more than that. That's just a hope from a personal point of view. But at this point, we want to move the farm support package to something that delivers value for money, that adds additionality, that delivers increased productivity, better environmental sustainability and long-term resilience to our farmers, because that will help us justify to Treasury what we're actually spending the money on. And that's why we've identified the outcomes that I answered to Mr. Blair. We've identified a number of outcomes and targets and metrics that we're going to measure as we move forward, because that all, I certainly believe, helps us justify our case for the funding to Treasury, that we're delivering this environmental sustainability, improved environmental performance and improved productivity. So we've no plans yet to delay anything. That will obviously be for Minister to consider in due course.
It's in the pot anyway.
It is in the pot, yes.
That's okay. Thank you, Rosemary. My second point is just off the back of Tom in relation to small farmers and the 1,400 small farmers that are going to be affected. Would it be possible for us to get a geographical breakdown as to where? No.
Yes.
Oh yeah. That's okay.
I think all we need to be careful about is obviously it's farmers' personal data, and I think I would just want to check that we're not providing to you anything. You know, we could certainly tell you how many are in county. Or perhaps how many are broken down by SDIDA and Lowland, but I'm not sure that we could give you a map with where the farms are, because you could identify them, and I think if you accept that, I can't see why we can't give you that breakdown.
Absolutely, because I think from my reading of it and from my own experience within County Fermanagh and South Tyrone and other areas of Tyrone, we have a huge concentration of small farmers, so it'd be great to get that.
We certainly did present some of it in the background evidence during the consultation period in 2021, and from recollection, the number of small farmers broken by SDIDA and Lowland was not that different in terms of the percentage of farmers in those areas. It was a similar percentage that were impacted. I don't recall what it was by county, but we can certainly, if the committee would like to see that information, we can certainly provide it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Just before we wind up here, Rosemary, there's just a couple of points before we finish up here. Just you say the minister's in listening mode. Well, just with my Sinn Féin hat on as opposed to my deputy chair hat at the minute. In our response to the consultation, we made it clear that we would prefer to retain it as 3 hectares. So if the minister's listening, say that that's certainly the view of our party. The other, I suppose, the pot, the single pot being used for other schemes. You know, I'm conscious that there's no cap as yet on the Farm for Nature scheme, so I'm just wondering about the possibility of land managers and taking a lot of that pot at the expense of farmers who are actively farming and producing food. So is there a couple of points maybe if you want to?
Certainly I'll relay your first comment around 3 hectares. I actually read your consultation response yesterday again from a party. I read all of them, but I'll certainly take that back to Minister. In terms of your concern around how the money is used, that's something that has been raised with myself and my other colleagues when we've been out talking about this programme, and it's something we're very conscious of. So we have been discussing with Minister trying to develop a plan once we know what the budget is moving forward for how the money will move about to give greater clarity. But we're just not in a position to do that because we don't know what the budget is moving forward. But once we would get, hopefully, a nice ring-fenced earmarked budget for 3 or whatever years, we could move forward to try to look at the impact of the various schemes drawing off, because your point has been raised quite a number of times.
I just want to make the point that I know a lot of those small farmers, and they're people who go out to building sites and do other jobs during the day on the farm, and I think the excuse from the department that these people have other source of income to supplement it, I think it's unfair on those farmers who in their own rights are food producers and in their own rights are environmental custodians. And I just think it would be a shock to take those, to be a big impact on those 1,400 farmers. And what's the last thing I want to mention? Sorry for hogging it, but just when you're here. At one point in the past, we were on the transition towards an equal rate of entitlements. Is the Minister reminded to resume that trajectory? Because I'm conscious we're 5/7 along the way, is that right?
We're 5/7 along the way, and then because we have redirected 9% to beef carbon reduction, that difference in terms of absolute or real value diminishes. There's not as big a difference, and whenever we reduce by another 8%, that difference becomes less. So being very clear, we haven't discussed that with Minister yet, that particular issue. But at a working level, we have just been leaving them as they are because we recognise that we're going to redirect the funding, and therefore any difference in those last couple of sevens is going to diminish. And they should become more equal as we move forward because we're redirecting funding.
I'm conscious that for the large part the people with the lowest entitlements are also the smaller farmers as well, so it was probably a double hit in them, I suppose. So Thank you very much for that, Rosemary and George. And funny, I met you at the show last week. Rosemary, it's great to meet you. And I should have said maybe at the outset, I think it might be appropriate, maybe the committee writes to the RUAS after a fantastic Balmoral show. Commend them on our show, another fantastic show. So thank you, Rosemary and George. See you again.
We're just going to sit here. If that's
Are you going to sit on, are you?
Sitting on there. They're doing the next
Oh, you're very
session.
welcome. Yeah, I'm out of practice here, you see. I'm only just a substitute today, someone.
You're just
No,
testing
good,
it.
okay, now.
You're just testing it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
Thank you. Okay, we're briefing now from the department on the carbon footprinting project. It's page 20 to 24 of the briefing paper. And again, welcome again, Rosemary and George. And the objectives of the carbon footprinting project is to efficiently capture data from all farms to determine the net greenhouse gas emissions produced from routine farm activities, and in return highlight areas where changes can be made to reduce emissions. The next steps will include to procure a carbon calculator, and then work will be undertaken to finalise the data required for the project and the data collection process. It is anticipated this will take approximately 3 to 4 months. On-farm data collection is planned to commence in autumn 2024, the first carbon footprints being produced shortly thereafter. So, Rosemary and George, I invite you to brief the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to pass across, really, George to give the introductory statement. So, George.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to give the briefing to the committee on the carbon footprinting project. And Mr. Chairman, as you have said, the plan by delivering the carbon footprinting project is to provide all farm businesses in Northern Ireland with a baseline whole farm carbon footprint, which will set out their greenhouse gas emissions. And then training, similar to we've discussed already this morning, training will be provided by CAFRE to help farmers to interpret their carbon footprinting reports and identify those actions they can take to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from their farms. This project, while important to farmers, also enables the department to meet a legislative requirement as set in Section 19 of the Climate Change Act. In terms of developing the project, this has been ongoing really from September 22, and we're developing it in co-design with the Carbon Farming Partnership Group. And as I mentioned, development began in September 22 following a meeting of the then Dear Minister with industry representatives who proposed a pilot farm carbon programme at that time. Within our own division then we subsequently started work to develop the project and a business case to fund the project. The outline business case for the project for 14.4 million was approved by the Department of Finance last October. And what this business case gives cover for is for a baseline whole farm carbon footprints to be conducted across all farms over a 4-year period, starting this year to then 27-28. And we mentioned the term whole farm carbon footprint. What that essentially means is that it covers all farm enterprises within a farm business. So for example, where within a farm business there's a dairy enterprise or a poultry enterprise, a whole farm carbon footprint will take those both into account. Similarly, a beef and sheep, both enterprises will be taken into account. But farmers, when they get the results, they'll get a whole farm carbon footprint, and they'll also get results for each enterprise level on the farm. In terms of project delivery, so the plan is that the project will be rolled out initially to members of the Northern Ireland Beef and Lamb Farm Quality Assurance Scheme, and that totals around 11,200 farm businesses. Once they're completed, which will be really in years 1 and 2, the project will roll out to all remaining farm businesses. And the Livestock and Meat Commission, they will be the body tasked with delivering the project on the ground to FQAS members, and we're doing that through a service level agreement with the LMC. The calculation of a farm's whole farm carbon footprint requires collection of a wide range of raw data from the farm business. For example, the number and ages of livestock on the farm, the land area that the farm business is farming, crops grown, the livestock feed used, fuel and fertiliser used. Some of this data is already held by the department, and we'll be drawing that data from the department to feed into the overall data that's required. But any remaining data then will be collected through visits to each individual farm, and those visits will be taken forward by the LMC. During the development of the project, we've undertaken significant engagement with farmer representatives to address their concerns about the individual farm business data that will be collected and held by DAERA for the project. And as part of that, we've developed a carbon footprinting privacy notice, and that is currently being finalised with farmer representatives and other industry projects or industry partners involved in the project. We'll also put in place a data sharing agreement between DAERA and LMC, and again that is currently being developed. Once the raw data is collected, it'll be verified by the LMC and then inputted to a carbon calculator to produce the farm's carbon footprint. And we're currently have just launched a tender competition to procure a carbon calculator for this project, and that tender competition should conclude in June, towards the end of June of this year. And as has already been mentioned, the current planning assumption is that participation in the project, which includes completing the whole farm carbon footprint and the CAFRE training, will become one of the conditionalities for receipt of the new farm sustainability payment from January 2026. As Chairman, you mentioned in your introduction, once the carbon calculator is procured, we will be undertaking work to finalise the data required for the project to ensure it aligns properly with the carbon calculator requirements. And that will then enable the IT system within DAERA to be finalised and to enable the flow of data from the LMC to the calculator and back to DAERA. As you mentioned, that will take approximately 3 to 4 months, and at that point then we'll start the data collection on farm and produce the carbon footprint reports shortly thereafter, so hopefully by the autumn of this year. Chairman, again, that's provided a brief overview of the project, and welcome your views and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to temporarily move aside and let the chair take over for this section.
You could have stood there.
Wouldn't want to usurp you at home.
Okay, apologies, Rosemary and George, thanks for that, do appreciate it. Okay, John Blair, first question.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, George, for the presentation and explanation there. One thing that comes to my mind is that previous conversations, including at the committee in the previous mandate of the Assembly, seem to show that not all measures of carbon or carbon reduction, rather, were being counted in assessment. The Climate Change Committee carbon budget reports discussions, for example, I think highlighted that proactive measures taken by farmers in relation to hedgerows, for example, land use change that may happen after an original assessment, but change for the better, were not taken into account when the individual farms were being assessed. Does this programme make any improvements in terms of the assessments of improvements that might be made as people progress through this journey?
Yeah. So in terms of measuring the carbon footprint of farms, the ability to, I suppose at farm level, record the hedges, the trees, the sequestration of those is still very limited, and the calculators are evolving to take account of that. But we have written into the tender specification the ability to enter that data once it becomes available, so we're not losing anything. There are default figures that most calculators use at the minute, and that will give a rough estimation, but what we want to use is the actual data going forward, and that's some of the work we'll take forward with the calculator when that's in place.
So the default, maybe Chair, the default calculators that are being used currently, do they include an assessment of sequestration for hedgerows and land use change?
Some do.
They do?
Some do.
Okay.
And again, as I said, part of the procurement is to ensure we get a calculator that we can do all that as part of the project.
Once procured then, if further improvements are made, could they be taken on, would it be scope in the tender to allow further enhancements to considerations and accounting
There will be.
where improvements are made?
Yeah. Yes, there will be. So within the tender, we've, I suppose, set the status quo on what we can do now, but we've also written in the ability to add in additional fields or bring in additional data if that becomes available over the lifetime of the project. One of the objectives of the project as well is, as well as providing farmers their data, we want to carry out a representative sample of footprints both in year 1 and then repeat in year 3. And the purpose of that then is to engage with inventory to try and better reflect the data that's held by the inventory, and that again will better inform the CCT in their budgets.
Okay, thank you.
All right, John, thank you. Patsy?
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for that. I'm a novice to this type of stuff, but what I'm trying to establish is, from what I'm hearing or what I'm reading, is that there are different methodologies, picking up on John's point there. There are different methodologies of calculation which lead to different outcomes in the calculation process. Now, I'm intrigued by that, because if you have multiple calculators in front of you given different outcomes or different results, that can skew, alter, be of benefit, be of negative. And I'm just, whenever I read your final point there, once the carbon calculator is procured, work will be undertaken to finalise the data required for the project and the data collection process. That kind of confuses my mind for me as to what exactly is the outcome of your process for collection of this data, because you don't want obviously the data to be wrong. You want the data to encompass all things which contribute to the outcomes that you're trying to monitor. So I'm just intrigued by that. Can you fill me in on the blank spots, of which I have numerous there, as you can probably gather, and that's why I'm asking the questions.
No, certainly do my best to address that. So you're right, there are a number of different calculators available on the market. In actual fact, last year DEFRA undertook a harmonisation review of calculators to basically look across the most commonly used calculators and to try and produce standardised guidance and advice going forward. So that report was produced or published in January of this year, and we have used the findings of that to set the requirements for the calculator within the tender documentation. So that very much sets the standards that calculators should adhere to, and the various conditions under which they operate. That in itself will enable us to get a calculator that's widely used. But again, through this project, we're using one calculator. So again, all the results that we're producing across Northern Ireland will be produced on a consistent and standardised way. And that really helps going forward in terms of ensuring the data we're presenting and reporting on is standard and consistent right across the country.
I get that bit. Whenever you're using one calculator, I'd be shocked if you had a different outcome to but is it the case that some 20-odd different methodologies of calculation have been used within the UK?
There's some 80-odd different calculators within the UK, and each, I suppose, do different things, but they also use slightly different equations in their makeup.
Can I just ask, now this is intriguing me, because if you have potentially 80 different outcomes to a calculation which you want to be standard, then does that not confuse, conflate, mix the whole thing up and not give you a reading that you require? That you really require?
It'll give us a reading based on the data that is entered in that consistent way. And again, when we're reporting, it means we're reporting it consistently. Yes, it could be a slightly different reading from a different calculator, but again, the standards we're using in the calculator we're procuring hopefully will give us that confidence to stand over the results that we're getting.
So say the Climate Change Committee comes in and says, well, which methodology are you using here, right, and what are your outcomes? And they say, hang on a wee minute, there's guys over in, we'll say, Oxford, use a different methodology and get a different outcome. How does that help inform them? I'm asking the inevitable question, how does it help inform them to at least draw some conclusions of the harmonisation of outcomes, or the actual outcomes that they need to be able to look at, rather than looking at a plethora of results in front of them that you need to be an absolute scientist to glean anything from. I'm just trying to get to how standardisation can be achieved whenever you have such a complexity of various methodologies throughout it all that seem, to my mind anyway, might be a simple conclusion I'm coming to, that would just really confuse things for the CCC.
Yeah. So again, in terms of, I suppose, carbon measurement, the general rule of thumb is that the GWP 100 measurement is used at the minute, and that's used sort of internationally to present and profile carbon going forward. There is a train of thought, and you're right, there's science being undertaken to look at alternative methods of reporting on greenhouse gas and carbon, given the life cycle, particularly of methane. And that's, I suppose, commonly referred to as the GWP star methodology. Currently, it's at GWP 100 that's accepted, and the calculators all report on that standard. We have, again, built into the tender going forward that if that methodology changes and the alternative method of reporting on methane is brought in, that we can rerun the reports to get the data then that reflects that new measurement.
So what I'm basically trying to get to the bottom of is, which of the 80, potentially 80 different methodologies of calculation are you pointing the direction of at the minute?
But again, we're out to tender, so it's an open competition, but we have taken the guidance and the advice from the DEFRA report in terms of what they recommended for calculators going forward. We've used that to shape the tender documentation, and we've identified the key standards that calculators must meet. So any calculator that comes forward will meet those standards, and that's the one we'll be using.
And I think if I could just come in,
Yes.
we will be looking for one that's based on the most up-to-date science,
Yes.
and has the ability to move with the science, so that as far as possible, one collection of data will do, as George
Yes.
described, and if we need to rerun it, we can rerun it. What we're trying to do in all of this is to start on a journey. There's the baseline, there's the mitigations you can take to reduce your emissions. The absolute figures may not be 100% accurate, but the journey is correct.
Right. And in that journey, are you mentored, guided, advised by the CCC?
CCC are providing advice to all those bodies that are, I suppose, developing calculators, and they're using the best guidance from them. In terms of what we're doing, we will get the carbon footprint, or each farmer will get their carbon footprint, and then they'll be provided through training and support through CAFRE and through industry processors to help then implement mitigations that can help reduce their carbon.
I get what you're saying. You maybe didn't hear my question right. Does CCC have any input into, say, look, these are the standards we require, this is the methodology we would prefer that you use to obtain those outcomes?
CCC are using a bit, as Rosemary said, they are using the best available science at the time to form their advice and guidance. And
was the answer to that yes or no? Have they an input what the department's doing?
They're
Providing, I think the answer is they provide advice to the department.
Okay.
And where that is based on good science, the department will move forward with that. But you will be aware that the CCC's advice to the department in terms of meeting the climate change targets are to reduce livestock numbers. That's not at the minute necessarily the path that we're completely moving on as a department. So yes, we look at the best science. And the CCC does give the department advice, and we consider that. But are they directly involved in the tender process for the carbon calculator? No.
No, I wouldn't expect them to be, but you're guided by their advice as to
yes.
what the best methodology is.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Declan.
Thank you, Chair. This is out for procurement at the minute, isn't it?
Yes.
This new calculator. And I note on the briefing document that you said that this will be compulsory to have for the new farm sustainability payment from January 26. What will happen to farms that don't have that by January 2026? Because see, there's any delay in the procurement exercise, and I'm conscious that the LMC is rolled out till half of the farmers in the first instance. If there's a delay to the rollout of this scheme, will farmers, through no fault of their own, be penalised for the farm sustainability payment?
Maybe if I can take that one, George. As outlined in the earlier briefing, Declan, participation in the carbon footprinting is defined as registering for the scheme and undertaking training when it is offered. So in the same way, and the best analogy I can give you, in the same way as the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme has been offered on a zonal basis, not every farmer will be offered carbon footprinting or training at the same time. So it's when it's offered. And as I said earlier, we're trying to discuss with our Minister what this, when this is offered, actually means. Is it offered once and you don't do it, or is it offered twice? So that we're trying to bring as many people with us. So farmers will not be disadvantaged on the 1st of January 2026 if they have not been offered carbon footprinting. It's probably the answer you want.
Yes, that's an important clarification. And just secondly, Chair, with your indulgence, in terms of achieving the net balance, obviously farms are well placed for that in terms of their ability to sequester carbon. I know that from speaking to farmers in the past that they were exercised that that the carbon credits should go towards them, and that what the good work that they do in sequestering carbon in land isn't used to somehow compensate for the excessive carbon footprint of others. So how exactly will farmers be credited in some way for the carbon that they sequester on their farm?
Really, at this point in time, this first phase of the project will give them a baseline to let them know what are their emissions and are they sequestering carbon, and then similar to the soil scheme, if we were able to repeat, we're able to see how the business has moved. At this point in time, we have no plans to credit farmers for sequestering any carbon, but really we need to understand where they're at this point in time.
And certainly within the overall programme, if I can come in, we have indicated within the overall programme that we would want farming for carbon to be like an enterprise as well. But that's further down the track. We're starting with the baseline information. But there is an ambition there, probably to get to where you want to be, but we're a long way off that as we sit here today.
See the fact that we've legislated for methane, given the unique properties of methane, will that be factored into the carbon calculator?
It's not as much factored in the carbon calculator, but it'll be, I suppose, when you're looking at the carbon footprint and how the industry's reducing, it'll be factored into that overall picture.
Thank you very much.
Declan, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Declan's initial question there, so I think what he was saying was, my understanding is that the first group of cohort of farmers that you'll deliver this with is those that are part of the Farm Quality Assurance Scheme. So there's 11,200 of those. So I think what Declan was saying was for those farms that aren't Farm Quality Assured, who come at a later phase, so they'll still be able to get their farms.
They will still get it, yeah.
In that first phase, how are you going to divvy out that 11,200? Are you going to? I'm assuming that's too great a number to actually include them all in the first phase. Is that right? Or
over this 4-year period, all 26,000 farm businesses will be benchmarked. So it's in the first 2 years that the FQAS scheme members will be footprinted. Because they're FQAS members, the plan is that the data required to be collected for the footprint could be collected when the FQAS visit is taking place. So again, it'll mirror kind of the rollout of the FQAS inspections throughout the year, and that generally takes place over an 18-month period, and then it repeats again. So the first 2 years.
So that data has to be collected and then audited, and then the farmers have to go through training in CAFRA before January 2026?
No.
Participation in carbon footprinting is defined as registering for the scheme and undertaking training when it is offered.
Not January 2026 is not the deadline there.
It may be for some farmers, but not for all. And we will bring it in a phased way, or that's our current planning assumption, that it will come in a phased way depending on when it has been offered to the individual farm businesses.
Okay. Okay, it just seemed a bit ambitious, I suppose, in my way of thinking.
And the soil nutrient health scheme is a good example because it's coming in a phased way anyway, so we will phase it in as a condition to farm sustainability payment from the 1st of January 2026. So both will go in the same way when it is offered.
Okay,
now, what we haven't decided is it the first time it's offered, or is it the second time it's offered, or the Minister's considering all of that?
Right, okay. That's helpful, thank you. Just on then this four-year project, I know you've made a bid to the Department of Finance and that's been approved for 14.4 million, I think it is.
Yeah.
Do you think is that sufficient?
This 4-year period it is, but it just covers this 4-year period, and then any future project will need to be considered again. Yep.
Okay, and just finally, I see in your paper you're talking about other jurisdictions there, and then even in the south. So I think the south, they're currently developing their carbon farming framework, which includes another programme to achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions. Have you had much engagement with the south in how you're creating this year policy, and does this have any implications for the likes of farmers on the border? And yeah, I suppose just have you been tying in with the south and your counterparts there, and how this might impact especially farmers along the border counties?
Yeah. So no, in terms of project development, yes, we engage regularly with officials in DAFM and all across the other devolved administrations as well. And you mentioned the system in the south, the AGNAF system. We've looked closely at it, and it's very much focused on mitigations. And we're looking at how we can build mitigations into our programme going forward. In terms of farmers farming north and south of the border, again, we're engaging through the Carbon Farming Partnership with the processing side, who are obviously trading both sides as well. So it's through that route that we're working to ensure that their demands and their requirements are met, and that they can deliver customers wherever they are.
But I think we do recognise, at the minute a farm could have land on both sides of the land border, and that farm business will apply to the basic payment scheme in Northern Ireland and the BIS, I think it's the BIS scheme in the south. But if we're doing a whole farm carbon footprint, how does that? So we have that little bit of teasing out to do. But we are very cognizant of that impact. I think, for someone who's going to apply for FSP, they're required to have a whole farm carbon footprint of their farm, but we need just to tease out, because in fact I don't believe there are that many farms where the land border cuts through their farm business. There are a few, but there are not that many in terms of a significant percentage of the overall 26,000. That has to be worked out, yes.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you both for that there. Thanks, Chair.
Anya, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one for me, George. In relation to the carbon calculator, and I know we've spoke about it a lot over the last number of weeks in relation to ammonia replacement farm dwellings within the planning system. Will the carbon calculator take farm buildings into consideration?
It doesn't take farm buildings into consideration, but it takes the energy that's used on the farm, the fuel that's used on the farm, so but not the building itself.
Thank you, Chair.
Tom, did you want to?
Just back to the small farmer, the 1,400 that's knocked out of the scheme, in a sense, will be knocked out of the scheme. Will they be required to do a carbon footprint on the piece of ground that they have or they're holding, or will that be offered to them?
It will be offered to all farm businesses in Northern Ireland, irrespective of whether or not they're in receipt of payments. If you think there may be some of those small farmers that are members of FQAS, it'll be offered to them. But I think what we need to look at, and George may wish to comment, we need to look at are the particular assumptions we can give to some of those small farms, so we don't have to collect as comprehensive a set of data.
No, thanks, Rosemary. I totally agree with that. And the evidence shows that those small businesses aren't as high as emitters as some other businesses. And we want to look at, is there a more straightforward or simpler way of collecting their data than maybe having the boots on the ground and the full process that we have to go through with the remaining farm business. So that's all being worked through.
Okay.
Thanks for that, folks. Just, I don't know whether this was covered. Apologies for missing a bit of your presentation at the start, and Declan sort of touched on a wee bit of this here, but I did notice that all businesses that aren't farm quality assured, that it will be, I think the terminology I'm looking for it here, the project will initially be delivered to members of the Northern Ireland Beef and Lamb Farm Quality Assurance Scheme. When you say delivered, what do you mean by delivered?
Essentially, that'll be the first group that have data collected and footprint reports produced.
Okay.
So, as Rosemary,
that will be done by the LMC or the
LMC.
Farm Quality Assurance people. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then it goes on to others that are not in the scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So will it be the FQAS people that actually do that for them as well, or will that be DERA people, or will that?
Our current planning assumption is that it will continue with the LMC, but that is still to be worked out. We're putting in place, as I mentioned, a service level agreement, and we have to tease that element out of at this stage.
And I noticed in point 7 it says the calculation of the farm's carbon footprint requires collection of a wide range of raw data, so that things that would expect the number of livestock, the land area, crops grown, livestock feed, fuel and fertiliser. So would expect all that. A lot of that's available on, the deer already know how much land that they have.
Right.
Is there any calculation then for the type of land or the number of trees or hedgerows that are on the land? Is there a calculation then for that as well?
Yeah, so as the data is collected and fed into the calculator, I suppose the back working of the calculator, the figures of and the logarithms that are in there take account of all that, different land type, different crops, the area of trees, etc., to give you your carbon footprint.
So that all has to be input by those that collect the data, is that right?
They collect the raw data, that transfers across the calculator, and they will input it into the calculator.
So there will be a difference if there's a farm that has 80 acres that has 20 fields, and they're all quite small fields, and there's a lot of hedgerow, will be different to the farm with 80 acres that has 2 big fields of 40 acres each?
In terms of the footprint, it will be different, yes.
Will be different.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And as you understand, DERA already holds a lot of that information for farmers who apply through using the land parcel information system. So a lot of that information won't need to be collected, but DERA will transfer that information to the calculator.
Okay.
So we're only the LMC, the FQAS will only really be collecting the additional data that is needed for the calculator.
Okay. And apologies if this has been answered, but at the end of this process, will it be a case that some farms have enough carbon capture on it, to manage their farm, or will they all be in a negative situation?
That's what we're trying to find out, Chair. We don't know, and I wouldn't like to prejudge where we are.
Okay, so if for example some had a positive situation, will those carbon issues be allowed to be traded?
Well, that's where, as in my answer earlier, we do have an ambition to have farming for carbon as an enterprise on a farm, where those carbon credits could be traded between farm businesses or wherever. But we don't have the information yet to make those decisions, and I think we're very much focused on trying to get that baseline information.
Thank you for that. All right. I think Patsy wanted one very, very short question.
Very short, yes, Chair. Piggybacking on what you were saying is, so your advice then would be to someone thinking of stubbing out hedges or anything not to do it?
Well, they require permission to remove their hedges anyway, but if we're wanting environmental improvement, removing a hedge isn't always the best way to improve the environment. So it's about restoring that hedge or improving that hedge. But I know when there are situations where farm businesses do need to remove a hedge for some particular reason, but then I suppose we'd be trying to advocate that they take mitigating actions to plant some trees or hedges elsewhere in their farm business, to try and ensure that they don't.
That's generally a requirement as it is anyway, Rose.
Absolutely, it is.
No fencing.
Sorry?
No fencing to replace it then?
Well, my understanding is you can put fencing where it was, but you have to replace at least like for like.
Like for like.
The amount of hedges that you've taken out or trees that you've taken out, you must replace that like for like. And believe me, the department are quite strict on it.
Okay. No.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. And before we go into the SL1s, we'll have a quick comfort break, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah, but what
Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Signed.
Okay, Michael? All right, thank you. We're back in session here. Move on to agenda item 7, which is the Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Order, Northern Ireland 2024. Refer you to pages 26 to 37 in your pack, and the clerk's memo is at page 26 to 27. The SL1 Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Order, Northern Ireland, pages 28 to 37. This SR will be subject to negative resolution. Response from the Department dated the 21st of May 2024 is in your table papers at pages 4 to 7, providing further information that we requested on last week on the number of serious dogs attacks per council and the potential of moving the SR from negative to affirmative resolution procedure. The Department's response has confirmed that the Dogs Northern Ireland Order 1983 dictates the procedure for any secondary legislation which is made using the powers contained within it, and explains why that means the negative resolution procedure should be used in this instance. So I think that was an issue maybe raised by Anya. So it's basically saying that the legislation for that is contained within the primary legislation, so we have no remit only to go for negative resolution. Isn't that right, Clerk?
Chair, that's right.
So there's nothing we can do around that. The department have provided quickly, in fairness to them, and I would thank them for that, quickly the numbers of attacks by dogs per council area. So have we any comments? I know this is not where any of us want to be, I think we've all agreed on that the last day. It's not where any of us want to be, but it's, I suppose, the situation we're in. So,
is there any clarity on the cost to councils?
don't think that was contained in any of no.
150,000 was mentioned, but is per council or?
It was discussed last week too, wasn't it?
Discussed,
Yeah.
Chair,
I can't remember if we saw it.
I may. I don't recall if it was here or in the chamber, but I think the either in our documentation here or in a reply in the chamber, there are discussions with councils on that issue taking place. That's definitely been told to us at some point.
Was there not a comment here last week? I'm just thinking it through, that they said because it's basically set up, it's only adding another dog breed to the list, that there would be no additional resources required to implement it. Was there not something?
It's not like 150,000, but that was across all councils in the north.
Yeah.
It wasn't good, like it wasn't per council or anything. It was like at one payment. I think that's.
Maybe
That
should go back
would be
and
my
check.
recollection. That the discussion was around the PSNI resources
Yes, that's
as well, and that they would already be attending these sort of attacks and things. So
I'm assuming maybe that extra finance was to adjust their for the exemptions, wasn't it? Was not to pay for the software and all for exemptions, I think. And I think, didn't they say there would be a centrally system around that or something? Now, I just can't remember exactly, but it was something around that. So I suppose, to be fair, members, we're coming to decision time in this, and we do have to take a decision one way or the other. So if we vote against it, then the department will have to decide if they bring it forward or not. If we vote for it, the department can introduce it then at that stage. So what's your feeling, members?
That's very brave.
Sit in silence for the next hour. I'm happy, but we do have to take a decision. Look, I think I tried to summarise, it's not where any of us want to be, it's not particularly where I would like to be. I don't think just the breed issue is the right way to go, but we're in a really difficult situation. I just listened, it was making national news the other day about the XL bullies that had attacked, I think it was his owner actually, maybe, in the outskirts of London. So obviously we're in a difficult place around this, and I suppose none of us want to be in a position whereby, someone will be seriously injured or killed as a result of it.
I'm happy Chair, to propose, given what you've outlined there, and I'm in a similar position to yourself on this, that we accept it as presented. I'll propose that.
Well, look, members, I'm going to read out the statement here, as we always have to do, and I'm going to ask if we agree. That this committee has considered the proposal by the Department to make a statutory rule, Dangerous Dogs Designated Types Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and agrees that it is content for the Department to make the rule. Are we in agreement?
Agreed.
Any against? Okay, thank you very much for that. Do appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item 8, which is now agenda item 12 in your table papers. It's the SL1 on the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. And just before we go into that, I should declare an interest as someone who may or may not apply for such sustainability transition payment. The Department proposes to make the statutory rule under powers conferred on it by paragraph 2.1 of Schedule 6 of the Agricultural Act 2020 It is intended to provide DAERA with the legal powers to implement the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment with effect from the 1st of January 2025. The rule will be laid before the Assembly under the affirmative resolution procedure, and it is planned that the ASR will be presented to the ERA Committee for scrutiny in the autumn. Just to remind you, members, this is just the transition payments. This is not the full amount. So the officials are still with us for questions on this SL1. Dr. Rosemary Agnew and Mr. George Moffat, who have been very patient and been here most of the morning. I would also like to say as well that I do know the Minister is keen to get our views on the broad issues around the sustainability payment, not necessarily for this transition payment, but for the broader scheme that we may need to discuss maybe later on. And I know the officials and Minister would like probably if we had a fairly quick response to that, especially around some of the issues that were being lobbied on, the likes of the minimum area payments and other issues like that. So anyway, it's just putting that on record for now before we go into this. So Rosemary and George, do you want to say anything further on this, or do you just want to take questions? It's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really think so. Just to reiterate that the Farm Sustainability Transition Payment, a farmer will be required to activate 5 entitlements on 5 hectares of eligible land. So that change will come in, and that's how the SL1 is defined. The SL1 is also defined around removing farmers who did not meet the requirements of the historic reference period of 2020 and 2021. So there are some changes that we're planning at this stage to implement from the 1st of January 2025.
Just, that's the minimum area and minimum entitlements on them?
Yes.
And the second point again?
The second point is around meeting the requirements of the historic reference period, around in 2020 and 2021, and we defined and discussed those earlier this morning.
Right.
But those would be the 2 main changes from where we currently are.
Okay. And those are within the proposals for this SL1, which is for the transition?
Yes.
And I'm assuming the views that you are looking at from committee wouldn't be for the transition period, it would only be for the more substantive policy around, or could you still?
I think we could still, as long as we could come to an agreement to submit a revised SL1, should you suggest any changes and Minister agree to that. I am presuming Minister was very keen to take your views today on the transition year and also FSP from 2026.
Okay. That's interesting. Declan?
Well, whenever I was chairing it earlier, Minister, Chair, I did express the view that my preference would be that the 3 hectares is retained. There's 1,500 farmers out there who you know, in many cases have to work outside it, and they're using their other income to supplement farming and food production. And I just think that 3 hectares would be a preference, and that and I also think that there's wider implications as well, you know, and I spoke to you informally, Rosemary, about it as well, that even those farmers who've got families and to get, you know, and I know this isn't a DAERA matter, but it's a planning matter, and like, you know, the main way is to get planning permission in the countryside is through having an active farm business, and those 1,500 or 1,400 farm families, you know, this could result in their children not being able to build beside the homestead. So, and I appreciate that the PPS 21 policy doesn't specify you have to have a farm business ID, but planning authorities and the councils automatically look to DAERA for DAERA records to see what farming you've been engaged in over the last 6 years before they might or might not grant plan permission. So I appreciate planning isn't part of DAERA, but there is a wider implication for rural vibrancy and people living in rural areas, because that's one of the very few ways that young people and people of all ages can live beside near the home place in the countryside.
Sure.
I think what you're saying, Declan, is it gives them a much stronger case in the planning application.
Oh, completely.
Yeah,
completely.
Okay. Well, it's not the defining part of it, but it certainly provides
It's very difficult for an applicant to prove they're actively farming if the department don't produce the stats.
I accept that as well, yeah, understand. Thanks. Sorry, Patsy, do you want?
I'm just going to support what Declan's saying there. It's often the unintended consequences of this. And particularly we sit here and we talk about rural areas and rural areas being denuded of services and disadvantaged to rural areas and rural poverty and rural isolation. Yet if you don't have people, you won't have any rural communities, rural areas at all. So that unintended consequence of that would be a big issue, and we all know we've been there at office meetings now to sit in with the planning authorities to try and discuss the case, and if there isn't verification coming from DAERA to authenticate that there is a case of an active farm, an active for the purposes of determining and getting planning permission for a dwelling on a farm, then they have to go, and that creates further problems in that the prices, costs, and we're always sitting in here in the Assembly talking about the cost of living and all those things. It does create, and that unintended consequences for so many families right across the north would be, for me certainly, I share Declan's views on that.
So, if nobody else wants in, the feeling I'm getting from the meeting is that we would prefer to go back to the 3 hectares minimum amount. Is that reasonable? Can I have agreement around that?
Sure, except that, are we going to record that we are doing this for reasons associated with planning, which is not within the remit of this committee? I have some concerns with that.
I would have thought Declan was only making that as one case around it. I think the bigger issue is the number of farmers that still have just 3 hectares.
Okay.
So I think that Declan can speak for himself.
Yeah, John, glad you raised that. No, that wouldn't be the primary reason. The first reason would be there's 1,400 farmers there who are working on small farms, and the danger is they'll not be able to do that anymore. And then that's unfair, because in actual fact they're working in building sites, they're working on other jobs, and they're actually using their other income to actually boost farming and food production, and that would be taken away, which would be bad. But then the unforeseen consequence then is rural planning, and because DAERA also has a remit for rural affairs, that is very much a rural affairs impact if we're going to impact on rural vibrancy. So that would be the unforeseen segment, but it's still relevant to this department.
Yes, Chair, and just in support of that, I would venture that it is the remit of this committee, because we are rural affairs, we deal with rural sustainabilities, and a key element of rural communities is people living in those rural communities. No houses, no people. So it's again back to that unintended consequences.
Okay, happy enough of that, John? Yeah. Tom, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you've got the feeling there about the 3 hectares. Is that fair?
Yes.
So we would have to come back to you on that. The issue around, and apologies because I did miss this at the earlier stage, the issue around the 2020-21 eligibility criteria. Can I just be clear on this from what I've read in your papers? And that is that the active farmer up to now has been, if you didn't have any livestock but you were producing grass and silage and were selling it, that broadly qualified you as an active farmer. Is that generally going to be ruled out now, that you have to have farming activities, the like of keeping livestock and that? Is that generally?
Generally, and all I can say is generally, but to remain compliant with the World Trade Organization rules, it has to be done on a historic basis.
Yes.
To ensure that we remain green box compliant.
Yes.
So we have publicly indicated that would be based during 2020 or 2021 or both. If that particular farm business did not have cattle, sheep or rearing goats, did not have pigs and poultry with grass selling, and did not have 3 hectares of arable or horticultural crops, they would not meet the requirements moving forward.
Apologies for this if you've been through this, but if someone, say, had been cleared out with TB for a year, or some other disease or a condition like that, or maybe they were forced to do it over some financial issue, but it was for a temporary period. Is there an option to apply then for?
In the planning process, what the department has done is identify those farm businesses that didn't comply with the sort of extended criteria that I described to you, Mr. Chair. But obviously there will be particular situations that things happen outside of farm business's control, and the onus will then be on the farm business to come forward with that particular case. You know, we have had raised with us, for example, that farm businesses who are contract rearers, we will give them an opportunity to prove that they are carrying out activity in those historic years. For example, by supplying their contract rearing agreement or something like that. We have those processes to work out. So there are a set of sort of criteria that we will use to identify businesses. The plan is that we would be in touch with all of those businesses, indicating what information the department holds about them, and give the department or give those businesses an opportunity to come back against that.
You don't have any guidance rule carried out for those people as at this stage, because the contract rearing can probably demonstrate that by a contract they have or showing that they had livestock. There is a different issue around those that have been maybe had their herds wiped out because of a disease issue or that, and will there be
normal rules would apply in that case?
In what respect?
Well, I would assume, and we haven't worked it out, but I would assume that if in one of those years, which is why we've done it across two, if in one of those years the herd was wiped out, but in the second year the business had started to restock, we will look at the second year.
Okay.
Which is why it's not done in 1 year, it's done in two, to allow for those types of disruptions, if I call them that, or disturbances to the farm activity. Okay.
And what if there has been, say, a financial, and I'm only thinking this off the top of my head, if there's been a financial issue where they've had to, sell all their stock to raise finance for 2 years, and all of a sudden 2022 they've got back into farming?
I think that those particular ones would at the minute need to be looked at on a case by case basis.
Will there be provision to look at them?
There will be provision to look at them, yes. There will be provision to look at all those sort of different scenarios, which is why I'm saying we have identified already the number that we believe will be impacted by this.
So I would find it difficult just if someone has farmed for 50 years, all of a sudden they had to sell for some particular reason for 3 years, they were out of it, and then they started building it up again. But as long as there's provision. Yeah. Did the COVID years make any difference to the farming industry in sense of people not? Did you see any blip in the system where people had stopped stocking?
Not at the strategic Northern Ireland level, and I don't think we've delved down underneath that. But we haven't seen much difference. We've seen a little bit, but not at a strategic level. We didn't see any difference.
Yeah, most farmers were able to go to their work to go out and farm.
Lone workers.
Okay, well, look, are we content then with what's in the policy around that, those base years of 2020, 21, about the active farmer issue in particular, and having done several appeals around these, I do understand fairly well. So we're all content with that and the explanation from the officials?
Yep.
All agreed. So, Clerk, I'll get advice. Can I put this then, because we have suggested that amendment?
No, Chair, I think Rosemary indicated bringing a revised SL one.
Well, I'm not sure of the process. I would probably need to be advised of the process. I'm looking around me because I'm not sure of the process.
So in that case then, can we leave it, but you know our feelings, and it's only in that one area, if that's fair. I don't think, how big a time pressure is there on this, Rosemary or George?
Well, we want to bring forward the SR early autumn so that we're in a position to open the scheme from the 1st of January 2025, but it is an affirmative resolution process.
As long as we have this resolved before, probably that's fair enough.
We're trying to get this resolved to try and make the passage smoother and less tortuous for all of us.
Well, we'll leave it with you and
Okay.
see. I'm sure the Minister may. He's got our view now on the 3-5 hectares issue, as you asked us, or as he has asked us to do. So we'll put it back in your court now and see what's best. Is that all right? But apart from that, we seem to be fairly settled. Okay?
Okay, yes, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Rosemary and George, for that. Do appreciate it.
Chair, do you wish us to write formally about the 3 hectares? Do they wish us to write formally? Yeah. on the
Members, do you want
3
us to write formally to
3
the department?
hectares.
I think that would probably
Yeah.
be better anyway, yeah. Okay. Rosemary and George will bring it back anyway, but we'll write as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, agenda item 9, Deirdre's written briefing on inland angling licensing and permit policy. Inland angling licensing and permit policy. Refer you to pages 40 to 55 in your pack. It's a departmental written briefing dated 10th of May 2024. Department has formalised its policy in relation to inland angling licensing and permits. This policy draws on existing affirmative administrative process and legal requirements to ensure a coherent and consistent application of the powers under the Fisheries Act Northern Ireland 1966 and the Fisheries Regulations Northern Ireland 2024 in relation to licensing and permitting of inland angling. The policy also formalises arrangements regarding the Department entering into management, lease and access agreements with third parties and provides clarification on riparian rights. A copy of the policy is attached to Annex A of the written brief. Work is currently progressing to complete a wider review of the Deira inland angling licensing and permit regime by the end of 2024. The review will consider simplification of the regime as well as a review of licence and permit fees. Any changes will require a change to policy and legislation. Officials will brief the committee in due course as the work progresses. So again, this is an early stage. They're bringing this to our attention. I do know some of us, certainly I and I think John Blair maybe as well and others will get lobby from inland fisheries groups, and I get quite a lot of that, and it may be useful at some stage for us to have a presentation from them.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, content to note the matter, President?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, agenda item 10, correspondence. I refer you to correspondence memo in your packs, pages 57, correspondence pages 58 to 68 in the pack, and at pages 4 to 36 in the table of papers. Draw your attention to a few. Pages 58 to 60 is providing a summary of the responses to the UK-wide consultation on contractual relationships in the UK fresh produce industry. I noticed a wee bit of media traction on that last week. Can't remember exactly what it said, but it was bringing to the attention some of that contract stuff. But anyway, it seems to be a reserved matter. So are you content to note this?
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. Again, we get into House of Lords EU Affairs, page 61 of your pack. It's House of Lords EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework on labelling of organic pet food. You can tend to note that, members.
Yep.
10.4 members refer you to copied correspondence from the House of Lords EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework on animal health requirements when travelling within the Union, dated the 16th of May 2024. Pages 62 to 63 of your pack. You'll note that the letter highlights that the regulation referred to affects the movement of horses and other equine animals, as well as captive birds, dogs, cats and ferrets, and requests information as the government's assessment of the impact of this regulation on pet owners. You will recall that we considered correspondence last week on the movement of pets from Northern Ireland to Scotland and back. We've written to the Department requesting that its website is up to date on the matter. Any comments on that particular issue? No? Okay. Correspondence dated the 16th of May 2024, pages 64 to 65 of your pack. And this is from the Clerk to the Committee of Finance, highlighting correspondence from the House of Lords EU Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework on the EU carbon border adjustment. But this issue was previously considered by ourselves on the 9th of May. Refer you to correspondence dated the 20th of May 2024, pages 8 to 34 of your table pack, from the Department regarding a presentation given at the annual George Scott Memorial Lecture at Queen's University. Happy to note.
Yep.
10.7, pages 37 to 40 of your table papers, regarding copied correspondence dated 21st of May from the Minister of State for Food, Farming and Fisheries to the Chair of the European Affairs Subcommittee on the Windsor Framework regarding marketing standards for the fruit and vegetables sector, certain processed fruit and vegetables products and the bananas sector. I'm assuming that doesn't have any direct impact to our agriculture sector at all, does it?
I mean, this is just correspondence we're being copied into regarding the winter framework. So,
don't think we grow any bananas here, but we certainly do fruit and vegetable products. That's all, you know. Yeah. But I don't see it having any significance to us. I don't think. Right. Okay, 10.8. I refer you to pages 41 to 45 of your table papers regarding joint correspondence from 3 mushroom producer organisations. The Commercial Mushroom Growers, Northway Mushrooms and the Mushroom Producer Organisation. It's highlighting their issues on the fruit and vegetable scheme in Northern Ireland. They also correspondence request to brief the committee. Members, you may recall that we considered a letter from the Minister at our meeting of the 11th of April informing us of his plans to consult on the proposal of a small assembly bill which will allow DAERA to amend 2 legacy EU CMO schemes, the Fruit and Vegetable Aid Scheme and the Agri-Food Information and Promotion Schemes. The Department's consultation started on the 3rd of April and closes on the 27th of May, which is obviously next week. The background is that Northern Ireland continues to operate legacy EU schemes derived from the Common Organisation of the Markets in Agricultural Products legislation. Following the UK's exit from the EU, the assimilated law version of the CMO regulation has applied to fruit and vegetable aid schemes, and DAERA has a continuing legal obligation to fund eligible claims under assimilated law. This has implications for the future Northern Ireland budget, given the potential for existing POs or potentially new POs to submit a 3-year programme to DAERA for approval in September 2025. Members, we will be briefed by the Department once the consultation responses are analysed and then on the detail of the draft bill prior to its introduction. Do you want to hear from those mushroom producer organisations now, or will we wait until we've heard from the Department and then bring them in? I think I'm happy to hear from them because this does an impact on them. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of timing, whether we want to do it now or wait to hear from the Department. I just think if we hear from them now, the consultations are only closing next week, and we'll not have a full brief from the Department. It may be better bringing them, whether that's before the Department or after them, or maybe even the same day. Sorry, John.
After the Department's response, I guess, if we meet the producers, then we will know the detail of what we're talking about. Yeah,
I think that's right.
Chair, you put your finger on it there. You're right. Have them here the same day as the Department briefs us on the responses, because the information as relayed by the Department will be fresh. Yeah. And they'll be able to respond to whatever the issues have been raised by the Department. That would be a very useful idea.
Okay. All content with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Members, just before we move on from correspondence, and again apologies for my lateness, but there was that letter that I only seen when I came in here today, and I think you did deal with it, Declan, regarding the powers and those issues that the Secretary of State is now providing back to DAERA. I would like maybe if the DAERA would give us the exact areas that are being devolved back, because he did quite helpfully outline the 19 areas before that the Secretary of State were keeping control of, and I would like now if they would produce the list of the exact ones that are coming back to him so that we know. Would that be fair? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, agenda item 11, draft forward work plan. Refer you to pages 45 to 48 of your table of papers for the draft forward work programme. To our last meeting of this session, the 4th of July, which includes a visit to Kilkeel Harbour on the 27th of June. Just to remind you, members, that will be an official formal meeting as well that day, as well at Kilkeel. So we'll be looking to ensure that we have numbers for that on the 27th of June.
I'll be going.
So make sure you're not canvassing that day.
I'll be canvassing that night for sure.
Okay, the committee team are also endeavouring to organise an additional external visit at this stage, but it's proving somewhat challenging.
Yeah.
Okay, agenda item 13 is the 2024-25 budget. Refer you to your table papers of 54 to 141, which is a budget paper from the Minister of Finance for next week's vote on the budget debate. A significant amount of the document deals with context, the economy, the budget process and the timeline for setting the budget. There's less detail on individual departmental budgets with figures for the high level spending areas. Tables towards the end of the paper set out the funds that are being voted on next week. These are broken down into the usual categories. Departmental budget outcomes. You can see that on page 72 of the budget papers. Members, there's not a huge amount of detail in this for DAERA, so I think it's just there for information for next week's debate, but we're getting our main budget presentation sometime in
6th of June.
When, sorry?
6th of June.
6th of June.
After we've heard from the Minister. The Minister's also coming that
right,
day. It's
that
the
day
day
as
we're
well.
starting early. Do you remember?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any comment on that budget? There's not much we can say, it's just a general.
There's nothing to say, really.
I'm not sure how much information the department have got at this stage themselves. I don't know. I'm not saying they have or they haven't. I just don't know.
Chair, they did say it would take to that time for them to work through their allocations. I think they do know their allocations.
Just wondering, they'll have no top line figure or individual figures for us, will they, for next week's debate? Because it's quite difficult for us to.
No, I did ask. But
Did you?
No, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's disappointing because it means, I suppose, next week that we're not sure as a committee or representing this group, just where we are with it. Okay. Agenda item 16, date, time and place of next meeting is next Thursday, 30th of May 2024 at 10 a.m. in this room. Okay, members, thank you very much. And again, apologies. Thanks for Declan for stepping in at short notice. And see you next week.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.